Well, good morning to you all on Monday the 2nd of November. In many ways, one of the factors that causes Australia so often to travel with the handbrake on is the fact that too often politicians are just gutless. Not all, but most. One who isn't is the man I spoke to last week, the Liberal member for Menzies, Kevin Andrews. I asked him what I thought an important question: should we be concerned about aspects of Muslim immigration? And you could say integration. Kevin Andrews argued that we need a debate on Muslim enclaves in parts of Australia. Well, the lightweight Greens Senator Bob Brown virtually argued the question and the answer were racist, and the conspicuously useless opposition frontbencher Greg Hunt said our approach should be colour-blind, ethnicity blind, background blind, that's a nice one, but focused on their ability to contribute. What Mr Hunt fails to understand is that millions of Australians aren't prepared to be behaviourally blind, and the behaviour of some of these people is repugnant to Australians. But watch politicians run at 100 miles an hour. Not so the public. But it's interesting to note that the same response doesn't attend to a very responsible piece last week by Greg Sheridan, the foreign editor of the Australian newspaper. He too wrote about Muslim immigration. He was right to say that all generalisations about it are subject to countless exceptions, or to use the cliche, not all Muslims are terrorists, but most terrorists are Muslim. Greg Sheridan drew our attention to the US journalist Christopher Caldwell and his book Reflections on the Revolution in Europe, Immigration, Islam and the West. He talked about the mess in Europe. And he talked about the mess deriving from debate in Europe, quote, dominated by moral sanctimony and a failure to grasp reality, unquote. Well, a few trips to suburban Sydney and Melbourne will give you a grasp of reality. But as Sheridan writes, Caldwell makes comments specific to Muslim immigration and wrote, quote, in the US, most illegal immigrants come from Latin America and don't have the Muslim problem. But then he says there are 20 million Muslims in Western Europe, and this number will double by 2025. And he asks, how did this mass immigration of people with few relevant job or language skills and a culture deeply alien to Europe come about? Well, he answered in part his own question, quote, the determination initially to extirpate anti-Semitism didn't help many European Jews because they'd almost all gone, but it offered a template for Muslim immigrants to find and exploit an ethnic victim status. He said of Europe, the second generation of Muslim immigrants is less integrated than the first, and the third less than the second. He says the demographic figures he cites, Caldwell the author, are familiar but shocking. Native Europeans won't have babies at anything like replacement level, while the fertility of Muslim immigrants does not decline through time. Greg Sheridan goes on, by mid-century, Islam will be the majority religion of Austrians under the age of 15. Elsewhere, quote, in France, 1 in 10 people are Muslim, and Muslims have 3 times as many children as other French. Caldwell writes, Europe finds itself in a contest with Islam for the allegiance of its newcomers, and says, when an insecure, malleable, relativistic culture meets a culture that's anchored, confident and strengthened by common doctrines, it's generally the former that changes to suit the latter. Sheridan writes, uncontrolled Muslim immigration is a change to Europe so great it makes all the treaties and bureaucratic tosh of the EU look footling and transitory by comparison. Well, when I asked Kevin Andrews a question and he says we need a debate, raise the racist flag up the pole from the Prime Minister down. Such infantile responses to major issues are going to cause us no end of trouble. I'm Alan Jones.